Still here with Sirius, Taurus, Moon, Venus, our moon night, and ascendant 0 degree Leo, sun 23 degrees Libra, and midheaven, a planet to conjunct Chiron Andromeda. Here is something. Okay, so this is continuing on my previous energy reading, and this is a topic. Yeah, it's usually gonna be like that. I'm gonna watch an energy reading, and then I'm gonna get my own kind of like sparks, and I have to stop midway to record them. That's is just literally how it works. Um, so that is basically, oh, but not for this channel. I'm gonna have to upload this on another channel. So that's basically the issue. Following my previous energy reading, look at this. So many things. I was talking about something exactly to do with the sun. Um, and this is the radiance, the shine, the confidence of a person, the solar qualities. So this is energy reading. Or, you know what? Manifestation. Because that's actually where it starts. And we're going to... Actually, this one is compatible for this. Even with those trajectories. Yeah. So this is basically a journey, okay? And this energy reading is something that actually happened to many people. Many people that have mastered a skill. Let's say somebody has an inclination to something and they have, look at this 22 midheaven, they have an inclination to something and then they do something. They do develop the skill. They challenge themselves, like they do something about it. Okay? For example, I like astrology. When I delineate the chart, something comes out of me. And I did put my effort into that. I did challenge myself, at a certain stage, stop listening to my teachers and colleagues doing forecasts and began to have my own try at doing a forecast and challenge myself until I built a certain skill to a certain point that I would never think that this is what I would do with, like, that this is what I would fend for with that skill. If somebody would told me from a person that would look at the chart and that would look like Chinese to someone that fends from even China, that fends their lives from even China using astrology, I would say, I mean, that's a nice fable. Maybe I'll write a screenplay about somebody that does that. I don't think, you know. But this is the thing. One of the trajectories that took place, and probably either those things are taking place right now in the collective, or it's the aftermath of those things and the 9/11 of those that did them. And this is where basically, how should I say that? The storyline goes like this. A person begins to develop a skill. They get to some level of flow with that skill. Then they start doing a channeling experiment, or, okay, and then they would go with that energy and see what it has to offer. Okay, what does it bring to the table? And so there could be creative works and singing and this and that. And then the plan is to extort them and to make them think that they are nothing without that energy. So what would happen is that a person goes back to their foundations. And as they go back to their own foundations, they still have their own skill to rely on. Okay? So let's say when I did a channeling experiment, I could sing like Beyonce and I could, like, all these things. But for me, I did not have an ego issues that I can't now, without significant amount of vocal work, get anywhere near those trajectories that I was even before that channeling experiment. And I'm like, well, there are many other things that I am. There are many other things that I do. Like, okay, that's not, so I can't do the highest, whatnot. And I don't have my ego hung up around that. I also did not build a career around that, okay, which is important. Um, and I did grow my own skills, not relying on those external things. So let's say when I would channel astrology and channel this and channel that, there was one trajectory. And then when that was kind of like, oh, but you have to do that and that and that, or we take that away from you and so on. For me, it was like, I never signed up to anything like that. I'll just do astrology. I'm an astrologer. I can open a chart. I can look at things. I can see the trajectory. It's my own skill that I developed. And what would happen is that those that try to extort, that try to leave a person with nothing, find out that that person is not left with nothing because they're left relying on their own skill, on their own blessings, on their own trajectories. And to begin with, they never have plagiarized. So let's say if I would paint a channeled painting, I would write STJ plus dot 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 because I wouldn't know what I'm channeling. So I would give a credit to that channeled energy. But let's say I broadcast and somebody tries to like forcibly come into my energy, I would still be me deciding what I say, and that would be me talking. It's my credit and it's my rights and it's my everything. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, people honor sovereignty, then they get credit. People don't honor sovereignty. And here's the thing, for example, there would even be ideas that I would, let's say, ideas that I learned, or I think once or twice I mentioned something that, let's say, I learned in academia, but that was related to, like, the trafficking ring. So I'm like, okay, should I give them credit? Do they want to, like, because I would have to tell, like, like, do they want to be credited? Um, And this is how a person that would normally be like credited and honored creating a situation for themselves that's like, do you really want to be like, so, but I would address the fact that that is not, or that idea or that teaching I got somewhere where that was also mixed up with those trafficking trajectories. So I don't know, like, should I name the person? Like, you know, so as a part two of the previous thing, because I talked about a situation where a person is not, plagiarizing energy or doing dark occult or raping people to steal their creative power or whatnot. And when that relation breaks, they're like feeling relief, they're feeling more aligned, they're feeling they're on a trajectory to take the power back and so on. And sometimes it would even take years to understand who are they taking their power back from. Because it's like, okay, let's set energy boundaries. Person feels fatigue, okay, let's set energy boundaries. And then they set those energy boundaries and they hear somebody suffering, somebody's screaming, and somebody's like, what happened? Why do I hear this person? And then they begin to connect the dots. And it's like, okay, now remember when we were in contact, that happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. And like, okay, there was something quite darker than I thought happening to that person. And even then, it would be okay if they did rituals, or maybe it was like something external that affecting both people. And I'm like, I don't know, but like, and so it would take a significant amount of time before they would understand the full trajectory. And sometimes it would even be the people that they paid to that begin to unravel the story. Okay? And for a very good reason, because they don't want to get karma. Like they don't want they know that energy has its own rules. And here's the thing, there would be significant consecutive trajectories of people feeling smug that they can get away with, but there is also collective awakening. Pluto entered Capricorn, collective awakening about narcissistic abuse, gaslighting, and so on and so forth. Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, spiritual warfare, a creative energy theft, cloning projects, okay? Like the scientific thing, even sexual sovereignty is no longer a value, but actually a scientific component inherent to identity and sovereignty. Okay? Different trajectories. So, part one was discussing that, and part two was when a person that is not maligned doing a channeling experiment and so on, then those that try to hook them up on having like almost supernatural abilities or skills, that person will not lose their ground when that is suddenly taken away, because they have developed the basis to reach that flow. And even now I have a eureka when I say that. They very likely have developed, now I understand, they very likely have developed not just the natural, it's not like they refined very likely something in their own energy efforts that they put into something that only those dark occult practices would take that and delay that basically until those trafficking timelines are abolished from, let's say, music industry. And only now I get that, because that is something that even I had no idea of. And I'll give you an example. I used to like, it's not I used to like, I like Nick Drake. And a couple of years ago there was channeling of Nick Drake, and he was both talking about the womb and fertility and how important it is for the womb, for the woman that's pregnant, for the baby in the womb to be in a happy woman and so on, and because if the mother is depressed and so on, that would affect so many things, and that there would be frequencies that can heal that. He predicted the medicine of like the future because he died in something associated with depression. And then he said people need to channel not only archangels, but also like just people, like artists and so on. And he said, I can give my muscle memory to people that play guitar, and I can and communicate. It's like I can lend my muscle memory, and he loved it when people make like okay, music from like refine or do their own take on his music, or okay, and that was like this very loving, embodying, encouraging, and he knew he had developed a technique, and he wanted the people to build up on that. So he wanted to give his muscle memory so that later the people can refine and create even their own stuff on that. And so, okay, it's kind of like a person almost giving their entire being to a person so that that person can continue on a certain trajectory. Now, for other people, it can be that they have refined a certain skill, for example, a vocal skill, and it was only dark occult done on them that was the reason that that skill was not showing. Only now I understand that. And so when those people have suddenly the flow state and so on and so forth, and then somebody tried to use that or take it away, use it in control, they're not ungrounded because they know they have perfected, they have dedicated their own skill set, and they build, let's say, for example, 2007 I was singing, okay? After a decade of singing, I mean, I hope I didn't shorten my grandmother's life because I would sing for like full 8 hours. I wasn't able to speak in like a call service or something like a company that was giving customer service or whatnot, but I was able to sing, and I would sing for 8 hours like it's nothing. And I wasn't able to stand on my feet, but when I was singing, it would be like it's nothing. And so much so that I remember there were. I'm not gonna name the name of the song because it's just gonna sound like I can't pull it off now, so it's just gonna sound stupid. But it was like a song that's a bit difficult to pull off, and I there was a radio in the school playing that, and I was just singing with that radio, and then I scared people. Okay, it reminded me that one of the artists that I was listening to until they blocked me when I mentioned MK Ultra, basically was singing somebody's cover, and no, he was singing his own song, and basically they got a notice that the live was taken down because they thought that somebody is plagiarizing that song. Okay, so or I scared my grandmother because she was like, "Oh my gosh, you can sing." It was like, "What was that?" But that was decade a decade of 8 hours a day, and I did not have money to take singing school classes or vocal courses. I had a friend that did opera, and you can imagine how, and you can imagine that went down. It was the time where everybody was listening to Emma Shuffle. You see, 15-minute cities is not gonna go down. Just the sound frequencies, okay? And then I would try different techniques. So, um, and it's always like that. If a person have a little problem with the voice or something like that, or can get like clogged nose or something, they would find a singer that has the same problem. So, what basically would build up to is that when I was singing, I could just and perfected it for another half a decade, that I would just open the mic, sing, and I might not be in perfect tune and I might not be in perfect rhythm, but and and that was just like something that startled other people that were way more tonal hearing than me and way more like practiced how I can just open mic, sing, close mic, take one, take two, publish. Now here's the thing. When I would reach these flow states, it was obvious to me that there was like muscle memory that this being channeled. But what I now get the eureka of is that, and that's going to be very relevant for the collective, whether it's music or any type of skill. Aries, Royal Degree Leo, Mercury skill, and that would be a situation where when the energy is cleared, okay, when the when what interfered with the energy is cleared, some of you folks might be beyond surprised of how refined your skill has become, and that is going to, how should I say that, the thing that you have established within yourself, the thing you've put your effort to, something to do with Saturn. Okay, I have, for example, Neptune in Saturn sign, and I'm in my Neptune square. The Saturn's about the Saturn Neptune. So some of you, and you see those things in the joy of the skill. It's not even about the crowd hearing that. It's about the sense of inner flow when a person is in that zone. For example, when I record astrology, nobody tells me to record astrology. Even when I was isolated to the T, basically, I still recorded astrology into thin air. And when that happens, then it's just megalithic. It's like the blocks and the things that were keeping something from expressing itself would be removed, and what is built is megalithic. For example, only now I have the eureka that I'm like, wait a sec, just a couple of years ago, just around COVID, I was just still listening to my colleagues and challenging myself to do a forecast. I have dealt with life risking situation, not only of my life, in using also the skill of astrology. Nothing and no one could prepare me for that. With, let's say, if I would right now sing the most, if I would sing the equivalent of Chopin in vocal abilities and so on, I would be less surprised than what actually happened. Okay, I have Uranus in the 10th house because that skill I've perfected. If I would write, the screenplay that would be a century-long classical movies that people would look to time and again, I would say, well, I have perfected this. Like, I have the hour count, I have perfected the skill of screenwriting so much so that I would not be surprised if that happened. Okay, it's not about, talent is talent, but it's not about even just talent. It's like I took something that was talent and I've refined it so much so that I would not be surprised. But with astrology, it's like I didn't even like there was no even time to pay attention that it's happening. And that's Uranus. That's the unexpected. Like I, that's just life, I guess. And so and those things tend to, with Uranus, I always give the example of a belly dancer because a belly dancer separates muscle groups, practices them, and then unifies them. And that's the journey of Uranus. Actually, when I channeled and I went to Amsterdam, I was doing that, and that's how I got to know like the whole city. There was like this segment of the city, this segment of the city, and there was this beautiful moment where I was taking like a tour in the entire city. Okay, because a lady helped me with the train ticket or the tram ticket, so that I would at least have something to do outside of the shelter. We had to leave and go back, and we couldn't work, and we like that was the trajectory. And so there was this beautiful moment where I don't remember what tram it was, but I began to unify all the little segments, and it was like a Uranus thing, and I was like, oh my God, all these things unified. It was Saturn square Uranus, and Uranus was crossing my sun, and it was like all these things unify into an entirety of something. And that was just a moment. It was so beautiful. Kind of like when I made a talisman. I made a talisman using ylang ylang and mint just a couple of days ago with the moon Jupiter. And then I suddenly miraculously began to process, because this is basically would be trining Neptune. The trining is Saturn Neptune. And then I began to process to something I never had the time to, which was my stay in Netherlands. But it came like all the beautiful memories summoned without the dumbfuckery. So that was like a miracle that is beyond expression. Because at that time I was suffering a lot. It was so difficult. Like everything is set up to kill a person. Like that's and keep them alive at the same time. And so and yeah. um, and then the country was beautiful, and there were beautiful experiences and all these things that I'm so thankful for when I process those good things and discard away the trafficking timelines that attempts to sacrifice like all those beyond horrid things that yeah. So that was beyond miraculous healing that came to me with the astrology and the talismans and the oils and the memories and something that I never even had time to process. Process is a sensitive is a sensitive word. So Oh my god. I'm having eureka's because since COVID, because like I'm processing. Anyway, um, more to say about this. Um, yeah. And I also, for those of you that are dealing with being the surprisingly more aligned person, why am I saying surprisingly? Because when when you do the work, you do the work, and that's like you do the work. You don't feel that you do the work because you do the work. And this is the joy that Saturn can bring. And as a night chart, this is really exciting for me. Because it is it's dedication that naturally unfolds into something greater than the self. Um, there's also almost an element of dissociation when you are doing the work, because there is an element of observation that is relaxed, in the sense that when we're doing great things, how do I say that? If you take a look at the Himalaya and you're just beginning to climb the Himalaya, you would really be discouraged. You need to see as far as you intend to go today, so that you can plan to stay alive, and plan, and then if you're and then plan to see if you need to go back and stay alive, and that's basically what you have. And all in all, no certain trajectory. When I wrote screenplays, it was really like that, because like there was sometimes the film would unfold in that trajectory, and basically, that's basically kind of like a mindset thing, and you have to also be willing to um, throw expectations out the window. Okay, for example, and the best example is filmmaking, because you write a screenplay, you detail everything before anything is said. You detail everything, then you go to the set, and it's not going to look like the screenplay. It's not going to look like the picture you had in your head. And the beauty about it is to wipe the expectations out the window and work with the set, and work with what is, and create while creating motion. And it's a skill. It's a developed skill. So, and then if there is and so in my life, I tend to bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger problems. And I would read of people that tended to megalithic problems. So I would be around nervous systems of people that tend to impossible problems and solve them. And so when I began to face impossible problems in my life, I just tended to them. And for me, if you are dedicated to something, then there's something that needs to be tended to so that that project would succeed. You tend to that. So let's say, oh, film industry, there is I remember when I was just studying filmmaking, and my mother was really like, she bought me an entire computer and thinking that I was be a programmer and so on and so forth. And then when I was studying to filming, she said, "Oh my God, you need to you need to push your way and so on and so forth. You need to have connections." And I was like naively replying, something that's actually true, because on a Wi-Fi scale, we need to take down ritual abuse altogether from all the industries. And so that life on earth can be. And then I said to her, "Listen, mama, also if you go to be a lawyer, or if you go to be engineer, or if you go to be a doctor, you still are going to need to have connections." And when I would be in academia years later, I would see what type of connections and what people need to do for that connection. And I said, okay, that's a problem. In the beginning, it was a problem of me being able to speak, to create those relations, and so on. And I thought that it's a me thing. It was just protecting me until I tend to the many things that build up to the megalithic problems, and then tend to the megalithic problems. When the entire collective awakens to the fact that there is no profession, whether it's a cashier, whether it's swiping the street, whether it's and all the jobs that we do when we, when we build something. Like when I was writing screenplays, I was much more comfortable with trying to work as a cashier in a supermarket. It didn't work out, but I tried, and so me to just have the time to write my screenplays. So when we see that it doesn't matter if you're the person that swipes the streets, or you're the person that creates the movies of the century or whatnot, the dumb fuckery, satanic ritual abuse, human sacrifice, use of dark occultism that affects the trajectory of the art that is created. That dumb fuckery needs to go from the entire industry. The entire industry, meaning all industries, in all timelines, whether it's an oil company or a banking company or I don't know, a talisman company or whatnot. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering what answer did I get about the Better Per Se talisman, basically I was told that unfortunately there are no current systems in this financial system that have payment options that are without satanic ritual abuse, dark occult, or sacrifices, and so on and so forth. So, authentic answer. That would be the time to do something about that. So, because it's kind of like the thing that looks like so megalithic to tend to, until people begin to tend to that, and before they know it, the people that speak expose the things that are so important to, you know, what's unfolding. Until that cannot be ignored by literally anyone. And every person has those things that they refined. As usually Saturn, every person have the mountains that they climbed. And when the path is cleared, when the energy boundaries are set, then what begins to unravel is basically what was created in that beyond hard work of sometimes even staying alive. Now, it is also true that if a person tries to live a life of another person, then sometimes they would even get a glimpse of that, and you know they would like really if a person try to live my life in the last decade, they would not have the easiest time. And you know it's usually coming from people not having the easiest time to begin with, which just makes it more tragic. I remember when I was in between houses, i.e., homeless, okay, and there was one village when I went to, and I talked with a lady, and she had this big mansion and nice yard and so on. And the lady was not sleeping because she needed to caretake for a sick husband, and the room temperature she needed uh, for his ailment basically was bothering her from being able to sleep at all. And very likely there were dark rituals done on them or something like that. But in retrospective, I just think about it. But I was like, my gosh, these women have, such a fancy house. And it's not like megalithic fancy house. It's like it's a beautiful big house, a big yard in a place that is, you know, overall looking nice. And she ain't sleeping. She ain't sleeping. And for a person that is homeless, it's kind of like, okay, it's refining the definition of what I'm looking for. Okay, because it's like, what are you looking for? A house? for By the way, when I was in between houses, so to sagen, I was like, what do I want? A house. What am I gonna do when I have a house? Travel. I need a place to return to. Okay, I need a place to set the plane from and land when I come back from other places that I set the plane on and landed. That's that's what I need. Basic human rights. So, and there's the thing that one thing that I learned being in between houses is one has to be connected with what they actually desire. And when people try to gatekeep that, they're setting themselves up real bad. So, for a lot of you, the collective, there is a reckoning moment where what you've built sustains. When everything else falls apart, what a person has been building sustains. As long as that person really have been building It's not about getting somebody else to do the job. Is And again, I'm not talking about allocation of, like, let's say if I'm a film director, then I would have a photographer, I would have an editor, I would have a producer, I would have actors. Okay, but that's what we build as a team. And when all else falls apart, that sustains. And I want to say even more than that. For example, when I studied aromatherapy, okay, that I would try to upjump my business, and I had an argument. And usually when I have an argument, okay, or there would be something that somebody would disagree with me, it would open a venue for the next best thing. The argument was that my teacher was telling me everybody comes to holistic medicine when they have all options not working for them. And I was like, well, how can we get people to work with the oils and enjoy the presence of the oils without having to go to that trajectory? And she says, no, it's not going to happen, and so on and so forth. That which immediately I knew is not true. Because if I'm asking the questions, it means that there were plenty of trajectories that were bringing into the answer to that question already before I even asked the question. And then I would learn about astrological magic. And I said, I'll never do that. It's too complicated. There's so many things to look at. Obviously, that did not, you know, sustain. And I did do talismans as well. And then there was spiritual warfare. And at the time, I tended to political assassination prevention. Okay. And I remember I had kind of like a Renaissance thing where to create arts that are talismanic and so on. And I began to work on that trajectory. In fact, I have several artworks that are on that timeline, kind of unify the talents that I have with the astrology. So what happens is that even when people stack up against somebody and it seems like, oh, we lost this, no, you haven't. You're actually going to learn something even more, perfect that, and just like this Uranus structure, they're going to come into alignment that's going to be beyond megalithic. And when people try to take that, they're setting themselves up, you know, the most they'll be known for is my mistakes. Because that's the residue of what I create. Let's say somebody, let's say somebody would steal my essay about the myth of hygiene, okay? They would steal the myth of spiritual hygiene and its colonial use uh, as a tool in building and preserving national identity, the British case. Okay, I've taken my seminar paper. And they would, and they're usually not very creative. They quote it in verbatim. Now, in 2025, wrote about the fact that I have no idea how did I even get the sentence like there was no scientific proof that climate and mental ailment create have connection, let alone deterioration of the race. And I'm like, how is it even like I remember me even before the degree realizing that there is a connection, and that was like, wow, that's so strange. And then me 2025 would have a side note that talks about the Inuit and the building of houses in the cold and the incest and the suicide and so and biodiversity and whatnot. Okay, I would have the evolution of my essay. Those that would take a framework, what they would do is that basically they take an approximation and all they would be known for is my mistakes. Because I refine the essence and I would be known for the essence while they would be known for basically the leaves that fall out of the tree when when it's herbs, okay, when it's autumn. Because and here's the thing, people are gonna look for that trajectory. It might not be in the Mockingbird's media. It would be those that will have this hint and that hint and that hint and that hint, and then they would come to these revelations. And those even people that, for some of the people, for some of the collective that I'm reading, this is going to be particularly the Neptune stuff, the Neptune placements, because for some of the readers, for some of the collective, it's just going to be one to one. Okay, it's like it's gonna be like that. These energies that sometimes are called Hecate, sometimes are called Artemis. I have Diana asteroid next to my ascendant, so I guess that's where it is coming from. Sometimes they're called, Aphrodite. Sometimes I call this, and it's that level. Okay, is what I'm saying for the collective that I'm channeling, because and here's the thing, it's not about trying to live like the gods, it's about there's a certain trajectory of essence that when people invoke that essence, they go along the line of creation that is internal, and that essence lives within them, and the joy of their lives expressing that is kind of like a deeper and deeper gnosis. One of the things that I was told to by a friend as I was refining teachings around, like, positive sexuality, transmuting sexual trauma, and so on. None of them were my original teachings, nor were I taking credit over what was not mine. And then I was just kind of refining that to stretch it to the details where it is accessible to the people that had intense traumas. And then one of the things that I was told by someone was that my own kind of voice became their internalized voice instead of the predatory voices. And this is what I mean when I say it's not going to be about the visibility of the mockingbirds. but the legacy that carries threads of souls into something that is benefic. And even that phase is not that that person is going to hear, internalize my voice forever. They're going to internalize my voice for a while, and it'd be like, remember when I gave the bicycle example, and there are like the additional wheels? It would be like those additional wheels that eventually are removed, and they have their own internal voice, and they don't need my voice internalized. Okay? But for the while, going from the predatory voice, having my voice internalized is actually better for them until they move to, it's not something that I did, it's just something that happened until they move to their own established self. And this is beyond the visible crowd even. When I was doing Spirit of Matter, I began to do interviews. His was my previous YouTube channel. Then, viewer after viewer, I would find out that I'm way more familiar than I thought. And there was even a person that was telling me that was so inspired by my persistence of keeping on that trajectory and uploading no matter what, like no matter how many views, no matter what this, the channel grows, the channel doesn't grow, keeping showing up every day for me. And for those of you that in whichever part in your life, for the collective that I'm channeling, whichever part in your life, some of you it's politics, some of you it's music, some of you it's both, some of you it's, entrepreneurship. Whichever part in your life that is, some of you is doing what you came here to do, but without the ritual abuse. And you're gonna see that showing up for yourselves eventually builds up, and it's only delayed until both you are ready to break through, but also where the things that would make that a Pyrrhus win to succeed, okay, like people selling their souls and stuff like that and so on, until that timeline is evacuated from the arena so that you can actually not just succeed, but have the fulfillment, the joy, the presence, and the not humbleness, but actually just, you know, and I'm thinking about Mariah Carey, for example, because she has Saturn in the 12th house, I think with Venus in Aries. And that was a case of somebody that even within those timelines she divorced one of the biggest men in the industry, and she had to escape from being kidnapped into his mansion.